Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that means Epic Comic Book Wednesday, in which myself and Michael K. Vaughan combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we have wasted our youths. And in this case, we're going to comic book adaptations of something that we have also wasted a great deal of time on, which is the works of Robert E. Howard, specifically Conan the Barbarian. Michael K. Vaughan is our Conan guy. He's our Robert E. Howard guy in this little corner of BookTube. And Conan has a long history in comic books. The Robert E. Howard literary estate has been very active. They don't let it lapse out of usage. Marvel Comics had the rights to the Conan franchise for a long time ago, written by Roy Thomas, drawn by John Buscema. It was a long run on a title that was reliably good for, oh God, I don't know how many issues that they did, but there were whole years where I knew that when I went to the comic shop or the bookstore or the drugstore, wherever I got my comics at the time, that the latest issue of Conan would be really good. I was following it right from the beginning. I was totally impressed by Conan the Barbarian #4, which was Roy Thomas's adaptation of The Tower of the Elephant, and I just stuck with it from there for the most part. It had doldrums, but for the most part, I stuck with it. And then Marvel lost the franchise of Conan the Barbarian, and it went to Dark Horse. And Dark Horse did a great job on Conan. Those issues were a lot harder to come by. Marvel and DC are the big comic book distributors in America, at least back 20 years ago they were, and 40 years ago they were. So that if I went to my local comic shop, by then there were dedicated comic shops, I could probably find the latest Dark Horse, and I would always ask wherever my comic shop was at the time. I would always say, I know you probably won't get more than one issue of this, or maybe two. I'd love it if you'd set one aside for me. I don't want to miss this. I went through the same thing with the Tarzan franchise. There were some Tarzan comic blocks done by companies that weren't Marvel and weren't DC that were great, absolutely great. The Dark Horse Conan was terrific. Visceral, kind of scrappy, kind of true and underdog tone to the adaptation. And then the franchise went back to Marvel for a while. And I believe, I've never had any confirmation of this from Michael K. Vaughan or anyone in the industry, but I believe that Marvel paid for that franchise solely so that they could make a mint producing row after row of hardcover or omnibus editions, which have a guaranteed built-in buyership. And Marvel has now lost the franchise of Conan. They gave it up to, I think, Titan Books. So who knows what will come next? Who knows what the next batch of Conan comics will be? But with the original Marvel, and with Dark Horse, and with the second batch of Marvel, there was always something else in addition to Conan the Barbarian. Like, for instance, in those original Marvel years, you had Conan the Barbarian, which was the monthly comic book, the color comic book. But then you had a black and white, oversized magazine called The Savage Sword of Conan that could be a little bit more risque and a little bit more violent. And that had unbelievably good issues. Some unbelievably good issues. If you were a Conan fan, and I was at the time a Conan fan, you were in seventh heaven. Just seventh heaven. I kept remembering. Every time I saw, I would eagerly track down every issue of Savage Sword of Conan. And Conan the Barbarian was on my subscription list year after year after year. And I kept wishing, in my way, I kept wishing that this were true of John Carter of Mars, which I've always thought deserved better treatment than it's ever gotten in a comic book. Marvel had the rights to that for a long time, and they started off really strong, really strong, with Gil Kane artwork inked by Dave Cockrum. A comic book artwork doesn't get any better than that. But the John Carter of Mars stuff quickly went off the rails. Marvel actually did produce a big hardcover omnibus of their whole run on John Carter, and I had it once upon a time and thought there isn't enough in here that I would ever go back to, and a lot of it is actively bad. That has largely not been the case with Conan. Those early Conan years for Marvel, you had Conan the Barbarian, you had Savage Sword of Conan, and Marvel also did King Conan. And King Conan is the Conan focus that Michael and I are doing today, specifically this. King Conan #1. Look at this Protestant thing. Good Lord. This is not King Conan #1. I absolutely could not find my copy of King Conan #1. Or any of, I have all of the King Conan issues, and I couldn't find any of them. This is a True Believers Marvel reprint. This was $1 at the comic shop. I think Mark Richardson or his wife got this for me. And it is the issue, but it was reprinted at $1 solely to drive interest in Marvel's new Savage Sword of Conan, in Marvel's new iteration of Conan. But it's not excerpted in any way. This is the first issue of King Conan reprinted, with Roy Thomas on the artwork, or the writing, and John Buscema on the artwork. My original issue of this, there we have a 2-page diorama of Conan's whole life as a thief, a reaver, a slayer, and eventually king of Aquilonia, the greatest kingdom in Hyborian age. Conan kills its previous king and becomes king himself. And newcomers to Conan, who were introduced to this character by the comic book, the Marvel comic book, Conan the Barbarian, loved it. But a lot of those newcomers had never heard of this character before. There were a lot of Conan fans that loved the Marvel treatment. But there were a lot of people who came to this thinking, wow, Conan, he's a sword and axe-swinging barbarian. He's somewhere in his late 20s, early 30s. He's been around. He's seen a lot. But he's not an old man. And he's certainly not citified. He mocks being citified all the time in those Roy Thomas issues. And a lot of those fans were slow to realize that we met Conan almost a century ago in Weird Tales as a king. The first time we meet him is the Phoenix on the Sword, when he is a king on a throne. He's in his 50s. The days that we think of as Conan the Barbarian are over. He is already king of Aquilonia, with a queen and kingly duties and bureaucracy and all sorts of squabbles about taxes or precedents to set. He has set aside his weapons. That's the whole dramatic thrill of the story, The Phoenix on the Sword. Robert E. Howard wrote a few stories of Conan as a king, as a sort of discontented barbarian who now sits on a throne. I firmly believe, I don't know of any textual provenance to prove it, but I firmly believe that one thing that was on Robert E. Howard's mind the whole time was Tennyson's poem Ulysses, which starts with an older Ulysses sitting on his throne in Ithaca and chafing at not being an action figure. I could be wrong about that, but that is definitely the flavor of those King Conan stories. And readers of Conan, fans of Conan, would have been introduced to that figure probably in the run of Conan paperbacks that were done by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, who took a very concerted, very definite, articulated editorial approach to the body of Conan material that Robert E. Howard left behind when he killed himself. As a young man, he was still a fairly young man when he killed himself, or who knows how much Conan stuff we'd have. But L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter looked at that body of material and produced, eventually, it took a couple of publishers, but they produced a little shelf of Conan paperbacks with Frank Frazetta artwork that were great. I think they were the introduction to tens of thousands of people to Conan as a character. I don't think most people who encountered those books and absolutely read them to pieces, read them over and over again, I don't think a lot of those people even knew about Weird Tales. I don't think any of them had ever encountered any of those un-L. Sprague de Camp stories, because L. Sprague de Camp put a fairly heavy editorial hand on a lot of that material. And later on, given that those paperbacks did well, started massaging material, taking incomplete drafts and making them into whole stories, which requires you and Lynn Carter to do a lot of Robert E. Howard's writing for him, which is kind of heretical. I mean, I don't think anyone would not want those old paperbacks to be there. I have a set somewhere here. I love it. Dearly, dearly love it. I loved it as they were coming out. I couldn't get enough of them back in the 70s, and read mine over and over again. It used to be a standing joke at my bookstore that I would need another copy of, Conan the Freebooter or whatever. And when L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter ran out of Robert E. Howard stories to either produce in those paperbacks in a kind of imposed chronological order, because keep in mind, that wasn't Robert E. Howard's vision. He introduces us to this character as an old man, and then hopscotches around his entire career. That chronology, I don't think it's any great literary sin, but it wasn't in the original. And when L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter ran out of that original material, they just kept on writing. They just kept on writing. Conan of Aquilonia and Conan of the Isles are stories that don't have any grounding in Robert E. Howard. They are stories of Conan as a king, first as a middle-aged king and then as an old king. And he's not a king without an heir. He has a son. He has a teenage son named Conan, whose name is shortened to Prince Khan. He's in that great two-page spread, which shows, I mean, John Buscema is a legend. He is one of the greatest Conan artists of all time. But most of his work in Marvel's King Conan is a little bit phoned in. This double-page spread, I mean, there's no one alive today who could do it. But if you look at it and think of double-page spreads of Buscema in his prime, 25 years before this, you see that this is a little bit dull. There's very little in the way of background. It's all really sort of quickly sketched. And another thing you'll notice that crops up all throughout Buscema's run on Marvel's King Conan is that Conan is not old. He gets to that age and then just stays there. In this issue adapts one of the stories in Conan of Aquilonia. And let me get you an example of what I'm talking about. Yeah, there is Conan. An aide of his is saying they've come across the remains of a fight in a clearing, and although you wouldn't know it's a clearing, right, because there's virtually nothing here. It's very lazy artwork. And when the aide hands Conan his son's sword, so they know they're on the right track of where his son has gone, that's Conan. That's supposed to be a 55-year-old man. Buscema just didn't feel like doing that. He didn't feel like drawing that, so he doesn't at any point in any of these issues, and that saps some of the dramatic potential from these. There are also boring panel designs, which is Buscema's besetting weakness. If he's not trying, then his panel designs this is very, very boring stuff. It's like I say, it's better than anything anybody's doing today, but it could have been a lot less static than this. And those books, Conan of Aquilonia and Conan of the Isles, introduce Prince Khan, Conan's son, who is not at all like Conan. Conan famously is born on a battlefield. He is chasing, hunting wolves by the time he's 15. He's a seasoned, battle-hardened warrior by the time he's 16. Khan is citified. He's born in a palace to a queen and grows up under the stern eye of his father. You see that process in the book Conan of Aquilonia, which this is beginning to adapt, where Conan faces off against Thoth Amon, his great nemesis, or starts to anyway. And it's a missed opportunity. I mean, it's relatively faithful to the book, but another artist, a different artist, would probably have been a little more inventive with Prince Khan. He's just sort of, I mean, he's just there. He's just wearing a dress. He's just, it's just a very boring look. It's just a very standard, boring look. I guess maybe there's a point to that in him being the son of Conan. Who wants to be the son of Conan? And this storyline that's adapted in these first few issues of this old King Conan is a story in which Conan faces off against Thoth Amon for the last time. I enjoyed these. I remember when I was getting them, I had no idea why I couldn't lay my hands on my original issues. Although when I was looking, I came across these things. Very happy to have found these. I have all of these. This is 3 of them. When Dark Horse Comics was doing Conan, they did a special set of, these are very heavy paperbacks, a special set of their adaptations of canonical Conan stories with the Frank Frazetta covers on them. There's number 1 with Frost Giant's daughter. It just goes on. I found 3 of these, but I have them all. I'm hoping that I marked the box where I found these so that maybe the others are there as well. It's just wonderful to pick up a great Conan comic book. This is absolutely fantastic Cary Nord artwork, and with the cover that is synonymous with it for those of us who were buying those L. Sprague de Camp paperbacks and couldn't get enough of Frank Frazetta's rendition of this character. I found some of those. I'm happy to find more, especially since we are once again on Epic Comic Book Wednesday talking about the weird collectibility side of the comic books that Michael K. Vaughan and I talk about. He and I don't think about it that way at all. We are thinking about these things purely in terms of enjoyment. Nevertheless, you get collectors involved in it. Oh my, I have a pile somewhere of those Dark Horse King Conan issues, which are terrific. They are absolutely terrific. But good luck getting your hands on them these days. Michael K. Vaughan showed one of the Dark Horse anthologies, the Colossal King Conan. Look at that cover. Just incredible. Conan as an old gray-haired man. The issues in here, I have the issues that are collected in here, but good luck finding the volume, the hardcover volume. Michael K. Vaughan has it. He has everything. He has everything in stately Vaughan manner. Look at this thing, the Colossal Conan, another Dark Horse volume here of Conan as a younger man. There's Bailey in the background. And good luck finding these things. They are monstrously rare and correspondingly expensive. No exaggeration at all to say that if Michael K. Vaughan were to take lead of his senses and want to sell his copy of this volume right here, he could get $1,000 for it on eBay tomorrow. If you put it on eBay for $1,000, someone would take that in an hour, because it's just not findable. They just aren't anywhere. And I think the Colossal Conan is even rarer. I'm glad that I have the issues, but again, I wasn't scarfing them up because I thought they'd be collectible. I don't think anybody at Dark Horse thought they'd be collectible. It was a scrappy third-rate company doing first-rate work. I grabbed them because they were great realizations of Conan. Unlike when Marvel Comics got the franchise a second time. They did really good work for a year. And then they not only overexposed Conan, there is no circumstance imaginable in which Conan should be a member of the Avengers, but also Marvel Comics is, as Michael K. Vaughan and I have mentioned, we've been trying to be light-fingered about it because we don't want these videos on Wednesdays to be polemical. But Marvel Comics has been infested from top to bottom with far-left, weird Twitter activist ideologues. And they view all of Marvel's properties, one of which was Conan when they had the franchise, as their own playthings, of an extension of their Twitter feed. So once after the really strong start of Conan, this really strong start of Conan in the Marvel realization, Conan became an ineffectual doofus who is constantly saved by any woman who happens to be nearby. He is outfenced by women, outthought by women, out-collide. Not just Red Sonja, who Marvel didn't have, but any woman, basically. And that is so, Marvel is so now tooth-grindingly predictable along those lines, that if they were still doing Conan, if they still had the franchise and were doing King Conan, then Prince Khan would be a differently abled, neurodivergent, non-binary black lesbian. And Conan would still be the patriarchy, but the son at least would be on the right side of history. Be better. So who knows what Titan Books, I think, has the copyright to this, so who knows what they will do. Here is hoping, in this instance, that they completely ignore Twitter politics. You will not find a more politically incorrect character than Conan. But one of the problems, no matter who has the franchise, one of the problems with a title, an ongoing title for King Conan, it crops up all the time in this Marvel iteration, which was one of the hardcover omnibus editions that Michael held up in his video. I don't mean to poo-poo it completely. The series goes on. It went on for 30 issues, more than that. And a little bit later on in the run, I don't have no idea where the issues are. They got Mike Kaluta, the great shadow artist, to do some covers. And some of the interior stories became fairly interesting. I became involved with some of those later. They must all be in the volume that Michael K. Vaughan held up. And I have those issues somewhere. I'm not going to get rid of an original Mike Kaluta cover. But the problem here, the reason why we don't have 3 anthologies full of Robert E. Howard stories about King Conan, is that it's not congenial to the character of Conan to have him be a king. One of Marvel's stories of King Conan, one of them with, I think, Ron Garney artwork, was incredible along those lines. Incredible. I have it here somewhere. I could not find it, but it is an old King Conan forming a kind of spiritual bond with an aging lion at his court. and Conan starts going out of the palace incognito at night simply to right wrongs and slay people and whatnot. It's a remarkably effective story that I will try to remember to find because I'd like to reread it. But mostly it won't work. Even in this first issue, it doesn't work. You have Conan as a king. First of all, do we have any idea that Conan would be good as a king? Don't have any idea. We kind of feel that he might be remembered as a king, but is he any good as a king? Does he have the temperament of King Kull? The Phoenix on the Sword was adapted from a King Kull story, and I think Robert E. Howard quickly carved out a personality for Conan that doesn't really work if he's a king. It doesn't really work if he's the one dispensing institutional power instead of defying it. Maybe that's part of the reason why the Marvel run on King Conan never really landed with me. Or it could be, I have often said on Epic Comic Book Wednesday that I consider Roy Thomas to be one of the greatest Conan writers of all time. I consider him to be very nearly on par with Robert E. Howard himself in terms of instinctively understanding the character and writing great adventures for him. But I think that whatever that is, whatever alchemy, whatever relationship Roy Thomas had with this character, I think it goes away when Robert E. Howard goes away. I might almost say the same thing about L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, who are absolutely surefire bets for a great, well put together adventure story, except there's a stroke missing from Conan of Aquilonia, and more than a stroke missing from Conan of the Isles. And it could be that the reason for that is the same reason why these King Conan issues didn't land with me, which is that all of these people needed Robert E. Howard to be in the mix. And when he's not, something vital goes away. I don't know. I don't know what that is. Maybe Michael K. Vaughan will find time in his busy schedule. The two of us could do a live chat about adaptations of Conan. Wouldn't that be fun? I bet all four of you would watch that. But anyway, that's our comic for today. It's King Conan, who's had a number of omnibus editions, although good luck. Good luck finding those Dark Horse ones. It's I never guessed at the time when I was searching around. I mean, that was one of the few things that would make me go from one comic store to another on comic book day. Because one friend would say, I'm sorry, my subscribers got the 2 issues that I added, and it's too late for me to get any more, and the distributor doesn't have any. Sorry. So I would say, no problem, no big deal. And then I would walk to a different comic shop. Not many comics can make me do that. So I knew those Dark Horse issues were good, and that's why I kept the whole of them in a box somewhere. But I had no idea. I'm sure that nobody knew that the anthologies would be so collectible later on. Who knows? Maybe the Marvel era King Conan volumes are also collectible. We're not trying to bankrupt you. But I guess what I'm trying to say here, it's absolute heresy. Because like I say, this is how we meet Conan. But I don't think the whole concept of King Conan works. I just don't think it does. Even if Robert E. Howard's doing it, I don't think it really works. Unless you're willing to write the death of Conan, I don't think it really works. So it didn't really work for me. The next time Epic Comic Book Wednesday gets around to Conan the Barbarian, and I'm sure this isn't the last time that we'll deal with a comic book adaptation of this character, I'm sure it will be in more comfortable territory for me. Pretty much any would be. But anyway, that's your Epic Comic for today. It's King Conan. See if you can find a copy of that colossal King Conan. Yeah, good luck. May Crom smile upon you. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.